rather informal. We have a panel of experts. And so we have Brian Powell, Logic B, and Darren Adler. I think you've heard from all of them already during the summit. But basically, we want to talk about performance issues that we encounter what's difficult for us. And this could either be team performance, or if you want to talk about specific, code performance related things, IT performance, then I have a couple questions prepared, but I was kind of hoping that maybe those of you in the audience have some nasty questions. And Aria and Jim Cree.
What are we talking about?
Performance and optimization.
Just to be clear, we have done no preparation on this, so.
Your whole careers as a preparation.
Exactly. No, this is an informal session, so really, these are all great resources up here. It's a good opportunity to pick their brains a little bit.
Also, any follow-up questions y'all have for my presentation?
Do you want to talk about maybe specific pain points that they have? Maybe,
well, I've been basically asking this to everyone I've encountered at the summit, and I, along with Casey May and Dan, those who abandoned me to go to the airport now, have all run into problems with dealing with very large projects, specifically projects with a lot of classes in them. And as we researched it, we find that the tribal knowledge of the community is really spread out. It's very anecdotal, and people have very different experiences. And then we ask the same question to different members, even of the NIRD team, and we get different answers. So I guess I'm interested in the extra panel's experience with what are best practice, what are things you should not do. One, if you're building a really large project with a lot of classes, if you want the IE response to be good in terms of load times and build times and edit times. So what are the best practices and what are the things to definitely avoid as you build up into these large projects?
So I definitely have one thing that y'all should do, which is a really hard thing to do. But my colleagues in LabVIEW R&D absolutely love to get these giant projects that have these problems.
Yeah.
I've actually seen them get giddy with excitement when they've been handed a 3,000 VI project that takes minutes to load, because it gives them something they can throw in the debugger. There's projects internal to NI that very large projects, the hardware teams work on, that I've seen my colleagues spend weeks on and do several performance improvements to LabVIEW itself based on these large code bases. I know it's hard, I know it takes time, and I know a lot of you guys charge billable hours, but if it's at all possible for y'all to get those large projects to an AE who can then pass it on to LabVIEW R&D, that's the best way we can improve those edit time, load time, performance issues.
What channel should we use for that? Who do we contact out of the 5,000?
That's a good question. I'm sort of removed from that whole channel thing. I know that AEs are usually the first line, but you don't want to post your 3,000 VI projects on the NI forums. So somebody in this room might actually have a good insight into how that's I know the LabVIEW champions have special avenues that they can get stuff in through, but as far as a CLA community as a whole, I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know of a good way to get that stuff passed in.
I complained enough to the point where they told me to do it, so I'm going through that submission process, going to a COT now.
Okay.
So you complain enough until they're let's give it a code.
Yeah.
So I remember one thing. So when we were working on various different kind of frameworks or component templates, we would use a class as kind of our object type, and then inside of there we would have a DVR or maybe even a queue reference to either a cluster, it would have type definition, or maybe it would have a class or something like that. But it was a DVR or a queue or something, so it was the data of that thing was actually just U32. And so what we found was when we started to have an object where in its data, it actually referred to type definitions, which are CPL files, they could actually have other classes in them because they depend on them in some way. You know, they're associated, they use them, or they have them, something like that. That this created this really big kind of web of type dependencies that was really just crunching down the project environment or even the editor a lot of times when trying to like open a new type definition and save it because it like checks so much stuff. So the solution for us was to basically, instead of using an actual like Q reference, we would actually replace it with a U32.
Oh.
And then we would have little helper BIs that do the casting. And by eliminating some of those kind of type dependencies, it really improved performance. Of course, at the expense of making kind of our component template just slightly more complex. Right?
I have also seen that approach.
I think this may be something that we discussed actually, but another thing is not opening the project and just loading classes. That's something I do a lot, but I know some tools that are really nice in QuickDrop, for example, aren't available when you don't have the project open. Maybe we could make changes.
Well, and that reminded me because somebody actually asked, maybe it was QuickDrop, if there could be some kind of API into our design palette for adding stuff into it, like while it's running, so that if I have kind of like project setup help tool, I could open my project and have all of my project stuff show up in the design palette. And then just thinking like for QuickDrop, like maybe I didn't want to use the project environment, but I love the fact that QuickDrop can find all my project BIs, that maybe there could be some way that I can get all my stuff to show up in the QuickDrop list while I have kind of my project session open or something like that. I don't know.
Another kind of pain point I have, I don't know if you do, but on large projects, especially when you have different branches of code, sometimes if you separate the compiled code from the source, when you switch branches of the code, then it takes forever for it to recompile. So sometimes I'll even, make a copy of the cache of the switch branches, but I'm wondering if anyone else has that problem, if people have creative solutions to how we can do that.
So you can create a batch file, right, before it switches your
Automatically
sandbox.
switch
It just
my object
changes
to
your
branch.
batch.
Yeah. Anybody else have input along those lines of IP related things with large projects or otherwise?
I have a comment, I guess. Newer versions of LabVIEW are orders of magnitude better for editor performance. Like starting with 18-ish, it was just a step function.
So you're saying you can upgrade performance by upgrading LabVIEW?
Yes. I know it's not an ideal solution, but like step function difference is insane.
I was just gonna say, Dan and Casey are on the latest, and it's still quite cumbersome with a large project.
I didn't say it fixes everything.
So it seems to me like a good takeaway from that. Like if I'm listening to that and I have like an old project and I'm in this room complaining about lacking performance and project environment, like the first thing I should do is go like download the latest version on a virtual machine, open my project and see if all my problems go away, and then talk to my manager, boss, whoever, and be like, hey, I think it's time to upgrade LabVIEW, and then kind of think about that as a solution to evaluate it. Yeah.
So somewhat related, maybe talking about builds or the build process. Anyone have any questions along those lines?
There seemed to be, and maybe, and I remember a lot of stuff was fixed from the news, but there seems to be a lot of weirdness in 2018 when you go to build things, especially like with some of the debug switches. So like as you start to remove, like when I try to make an EXE, I try to make it kind of as slim as I can, right? And
And as I turn off debug switches to remove stuff from my project, eventually things just start crashing. And I get weird messages that will say, hey, this VI can't be saved without a block diagram. Are there things, I don't know whether it's behavior of how I'm using VIMs, or it's behavior of VIMs themselves that are causing this.
Or the build.
Or the build.
If you're heavily using malleable VIs, you absolutely need to be in the latest LabVIEW version possible, which currently is 2019 F2, F3, whatever. Like, malleable VIs have had a lot of issues. A lot of them have been fixed. A lot more of them will be fixed in 2019 SP1. So as soon as that comes out, install that. Malleable VIs are great. They got off to kind of a rocky start. And 2019 SP1, they're in really, really good shape.
What is SB1 targeted for release?
Can't speak to release dates, but typically as service packs come out in the November-ish timeframe.
Okay, that's all.
We saw the same thing, so we spent a lot of time and money rewriting or refactoring all of our major tools to be malleable, and then all of our builds stopped working. And we were told by RD the fix is to go to 2019.
Okay.
And they were right. But my customers were like, why? Because I was told by RD, what do you tell them, right? Did that work? It worked. Upgraded? Yes, upgraded 2019 works. I was also told that they applied the same thing in 2019 to 2017 and 18. I don't believe them because it doesn't work. I saw the same thing you
Yeah,
said.
I will say that it did get incrementally better as patches were released for 2018, but there are still some issues. Most recently, I was able to resolve them by kind of workaround type things, but I don't, like for me, it's one of those things that I'm using the malleable VI. I don't want to have to go through a whole long list of caveats before I implement it.
So I'll tell you this, in 2019, there's a flag in the build spec for remove unused polymorphic instances. You need to check that box. I don't know why, but I was told you need to check that box. And there's a power file for it because they didn't know why. That's made my build.
To actually remove them?
Yes, even though I didn't have any.
Well, okay, so, and that box actually ended up being a problem in 2018, whether it was checked or unchecked with the build. I forget which polarity worked out there right now.
Yep. So that's what I've seen. I wish I had more answers for you.
And I know it's a new field.
One other thing I'll say, and I've discussed this with multiple people at the CLA Summit, having circular dependencies in your code can very often cause build issues. If your code base includes malleable VIs, it will 100% cause build issues. So with malleable VIs, if you're having build issues, the first thing after you fiddle with checkboxes, I guess the second thing is go check for a class that links to a type def, and the class that owns that type def calls that first class, and that kind of stuff. Because that stuff will most assuredly cause you build issues when malleable VIs are involved. Yeah.
There are tools to define those circular dependencies.
Okay.
We have written 2 of them ourselves. We checked on them a long time ago.
Are they on your GitHub?
Yeah, so if you download Complete CI through Package Manager, it's going to get updated. There's a tool built into that that'll find dependency cycles. Okay, we use that.
Along those lines, I actually have another question. In the build spec, there is one of the checkboxes that is something to the effect of make this exe fast. It's a fast load format or something like that. Whenever I do something, I almost never get an exe to build with that correctly. Like I will either not build, or when I launch the VI, when I launch the exe, even for relatively simple examples. Is there something, are there caveats to using that thing, or I don't know.
I don't know anything about fast file format.
We use it on very large projects. Lots of malleable VIs, lots of classes, and it works fine.
Okay.
It makes it much smaller and executable, which is great.
Right.
I have not seen the issues that you're explaining.
Okay.
And I thought we've been using it since 2017. They've been
Sorry, I can't help but weigh in on this. When I was at DSE, fixing that was one of my top priorities.
Okay.
Please report those issues because the past file format did have some noticeable bugs.
Okay.
And they have made huge efforts and made vast improvements.
Right.
But keep reporting them. I don't know if it's still considered a high priority issue, but it was for that.
Okay. I'll report that.
You were mentioning the latest 2019 is going to have these fixes. You know if the 2020 data will be built off that code base, or are those bugs still going to be?
It always is.
Okay, so
2020 beta will have everything in 2019 SP1 had.
What about shortening build times? People have strategies other than just splitting their application up into smaller executables, PLs. Is there anything else that we can do to decrease our build times?
Dependency cycles again, increase your build time.
What was that? Dependency cycles.
Yeah. They kill the IDE, they kill the build times. So we've got, I'd say our average class count in an application is on the order of 500 classes. That I thought was big, but I talked to people that have showed me I was wrong. And our build times go between 10 and 30 minutes. I think they should always be 10 minutes. When they're 30 minutes, it's usually because one of my customers is in the code and did something I didn't know about. I have to go and find it. Just from what I've seen, expecting around 10 minutes is probably fair. I'd be curious what you guys think about that.
Enough time to go to the copy machine.
There you go. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen LabVIEW builds that take 10 hours, so I don't know.
I have not seen that.
What was the SEO?
Maybe similar, but lots of complexity, lots of classes.
Probably some circular.
Probably circular tendencies.
Yeah, I think if there are things like circular dependencies that cause such massive build problems, one, it's nothing that I was ever warned about. Like until I ran into the build problems and I Googled it, and like after looking at 15 forum threads, I find one on Mobile that's like, oh, by the way, do you have circular dependencies? You definitely shouldn't do that. And of course, it's obvious if you're using solid principles, you should not have that. It's not obvious that failing to follow that rule will like dramatically make your IDE experience so much worse. And I'm so glad that John's team and others have made tools to track it down. But if it is going to cause those problems, I think it would be nice if it was native to the IDE, where it's like, hey, I just noticed that you dropped this huge circular dependency. It's going to grow like a cancer. And you should probably not do that.
So one thing we've been talking about doing is taking that tool out of the CI, making it standalone as a daemon. They just come and slap you every time.
I would love that.
I would too love that.
Well, Darren, when are you going to grab it from him and include it in VI Analyzer?
One of my takeaways from the CLA Summit the past couple of days is that we should probably investigate some of these ideas about warning you about circular dependencies in that. So I will talk to Stephen about that after the summit.
Probably nested inlining as well, because I've heard that causes huge problems. And I did not know that, and that did not come up in any of my searches.
You mean just like a sub-VI hierarchy where all the VIs are in line?
I guess if an inline VI is called from within another inline VI, the compiler really doesn't like that.
I haven't seen that. We really deeply nest inline functions. I haven't seen that problem.
It has slows things down, but I've never seen it like slow it.
I mean, I've heard the one problem you can encounter is that the code complexity gets so much. You have kind of one humongous code block without any synchronization boundaries, and that it can actually cause performance problems. Eventually, you hit a threshold where it's going to take longer to move that code block into your cache to be processed than if you had separated it. But we haven't hit that problem before.
Maybe some kind of guidance as to how many levels is good or something, or some kind of guidance on.
That's another thing. I wish that all of this tribal knowledge about what is and is not good were compiled somewhere.
Like a wiki or something?
Yeah.
A wiki about LabVIEW?
Yeah.
John, I don't know how serious you were about that tool that just runs in the background and monitors for circular dependencies. If you do that, can you please also monitor code complexity? Like throw a flag if the code complexity gets above 5 for NVI or something?
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, sure. That's what really is. We are serious about writing that tool. Other John?
So if you've got a project that's say about 5,000 VIs, and it does take 10 minutes to open, and it does take a half an hour to compile. If it's not dependency loops, what's the next possible thing it could be?
Talking frustrating on LabVIEw. Have you tried it in 2019?
No, actually, I'm in the process of upgrading from 2015 is what I have it in.
Yeah.
And I was
Just-
going to jump to 2019, but now I'm going to jump to the beta.
Just to play with it, yeah, I would suggest that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because there might be nothing. It might not be your fault, John.
Well, just opening the build spec can take, 4 minutes. Just not anything, not cheating, just opening the dialog.
For the EXE or for the installer?
For the EXE. The
Interesting.
installer also is slow, but opening the spec for the EXE is slow too. I don't know why.
I haven't seen that before. In my experience, the installer profile has always been slow.
A similar project from way back when, though, used to be able to open it almost, in
Immediately.
seconds. And it has to get compiled was done. So it went from that to, go to lunch and come back and it's done.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So when you're doing RT and HMI or host on the same project, I find that when you have a shared resource between the two, that causes you can't edit one because it's open in the other, and then you bash it against the computers. You guys recommend keeping separate projects for that, or is it just you just split the code, or what would be the best?
I don't do RT stuff, but I have heard that suggestion before of having multiple projects.
And that's what we do.
That's what I do as well.
All right, that's all right. I'm on the same page. There we go.
Yeah, separate projects with any shared resources, just isolated from both projects we've been on it. We've even played around with the idea of making the shared things that they share into a package that we can install. Sometimes the business is different. But yeah, we use separate projects.
Question. So, I'm talking about kind of the editor performance and how that slows you down just because it's literally taking a long time to do steps. I'm curious, where are you guys? Are there any editing steps that are slow just because you have to do them a lot, or it's just kind of painful?
Editing controls.
Yeah.
You mean the parts of
Control
controls?
editor is terrible.
Control editors? Faster ways to change the icons and colors.
Yes, God forbid you need to change icons or rescale an icon set.
Stretchies out.
Yeah, because they don't, they're all big, pixel based.
Using the control editor is definitely a pain. How often are you doing that, though?
Not frequently, but when I do, that's my day.
Yeah. That's a good one. Any other areas, John?
I just want to say I have the same problem, and I got a tip on a tool that's on Lava only. Unfortunately, it's not everywhere. That acts the plugin that you can edit system controls programmatically, so you can load a PNG in and populate it into all those 6 things without having to do the cut, paste from clipboard, copy, paste from clipboard, loop, that you end up doing.
Do you know the name of it or the search term which you use?
I installed it.
If you email me, I know where it is too.
It's on Lava. It depends on the VIP packages too. I think it's control, full. No, it's not Mars. It's Francois' tool. He's one that showed me about it. And because I was complaining, why there isn't an API to automate this? And he said, well, there was one way back, and I was able to copy those links before they made them disable again and bring them forward in versions of LabVIEw, so you could still hack in there and do it.
Interesting.
The resource editor, I think, is based on, but yeah, it's on Lava. It's only on Lava though. It's a VIPM package you can only get from Lava.
Any other areas of development that are slow and tedious?
So I'll just throw this out. I've had problems loading even small and medium project files which would typically load in 2, 3, 4 minutes. All of a sudden we're taking half an hour and even 2 hours.
to load, and what I discovered was I had my project configured for source code control, and the offsite server went down, and it's literally timing out on every single VI of saying, okay, give me the status, give me the status. So 10,000 VIs later, my project is finally open, and I can finally get to the menu to say, okay, let's disable until I can get a hold of the IT person to reboot the source code control server. So that's just, we're talking about tribal knowledge. Here's one piece of tribal knowledge I really got bit on a couple times in the last couple of months.
Did you ask NI to make it so it only times out once and then stops?
I will admit I have not done that yet.
That might be a function of your source code control system now. It handles the timeouts, not LabVIEW.
But LabVIEW could still say, hey, I don't think you're responding, so I should stop requesting source code control status for a while.
It seems like it would be a relatively easy change.
I've got another idea, thing that slows me down. I build a lot of systems where I have multiple EXEs I build, so I have multiple projects. And when I'm developing, I usually have to open the client project and the server project, sometimes the plugins project, have them all in memory at once while I'm debugging through the system. And if I discover there's a class that's shared amongst all of them, because it's a common class, and I need to add a new member to it, it's locked because it's open in multiple projects, and now I have to close all but one of those projects, make the change, then reopen them. And when it's 10 to 15 minutes to open each project, it's just, there goes a couple hours of my time, basically, waiting for the computer to do stuff. So is there any way that we could edit a class in one project and then have that little green thing that's synchronized to the other projects, like we can when we edit a VI that's, used multiple places? And not have to close the damn project.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, why is it locked that way? I mean, you can edit a VI that's being used by different projects, and then it's cool with that. It's just hit this button, and then both of them have that new edit. Why can't it be these classes? What's the problem?
This is one of those questions that has like an hour-long answer from Steven that I don't remember. But yeah, there's reasons, and those reasons are unlikely to change.
Jim touched on this earlier, but when you have a lot of classes, I'll back up a little. So before LabVIEW classes, part of the LabVIEW compile process is this whole type propagation phase, where we're trying to figure out what the type of every wire and every terminal should be as we go through that. Once LabVIEW classes were introduced, that's the first time where that could change dynamically, because when you have a new class loaded, it may resolve to a different child class. And so that's suddenly when type propagation became a whole lot more complex and a chance for a whole lot slower. And that's also why LabVIEW classes, those VIs all have to be in memory. I think they still have to all be in memory, so that when we run type propagation, that we can go and figure out what are the classes that satisfy what this wire should be. And so that's also why when you have circular dependencies on top of that it gets even that much worse. So, one of the things that it's your presentation earlier, sometimes you have to make decisions that aren't in the best interest of maintainability and readability, but you do it for the sake of performance. It's like right-sizing your classes, so you might even decide I don't want trivial classes, even though they might be useful for how I think of things. If I just have a whole bunch of 100 VIs all implementing a different overriding a simple class, that's 100 VIs that are all participating in type propagation and figuring out what data type should be. And so kind of figuring out, having the right number of classes in your app is one of the things that helps reduce the complexity for the LabVIEW type propagation system.
Your answer makes me want to ask a question that I'm afraid to ask, which is interfaces going to make the problem even worse?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not tell anyone, because we want to.
Because it's another dimension of wired.
Yeah, exactly.
But does it affect it if you're not using them? Like there's no interfaces loaded, does it still affect anything?
Well, who cares, we're all gonna use interfaces, so.
I mean, I would imagine that would make, I would imagine that would have to make it more complicated, especially because now the inheritances become somewhat more complicated, relationship between PIs becomes more complicated. I think it's another thing where it's weird because we have all these really great features in G, the language, that semantically is amazing, that as you become more advanced, you start to use them more, you end up paying for it in terms of your pleasurable experience with the IDE, like the pleasantness of your experience with the IDE.
With interfaces, my guess though is that while, it adds this other dimension and class of multiple inheritance, there's some more relationships that way, it's going to actually dramatically reduce the total number of PIs in the project.
Yeah,
You're not going to have the federal base class and all these method stuff in here. And
Might even reduce the number of classes.
I think it'll reduce the number of classes, number of VIs. Well, maybe not VIs, but there'll be a lot more small or modular.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if in a mature project there was a good tool to slip in an interface and then get rid of the extra.
You could write it.
I could write it, try writing one.
There you go.
I expect interfaces are actually going to help us in this regard because they're going to help us eliminate some of the circular dependencies that we have, where we pass in multiple classes and we try to cast it and check which type it is before we perform some operation. Interfaces are going to get us away from that, which will help. Changing gears for a second, though, I have another question. If anybody's tried this, I've noticed that builds in LabVIEW predominantly are isolated to a single core on the processor when they're running. Is this something NI can actually parallelize and improve in that regard? And then the second question is, has anybody tried running multiple instances of LabVIEW EXE to parallelize their builds on the same machine? Do two builds simultaneously. I've never tried it, and I'd be curious if it would improve our, we thought about doing this for our CI.
I've heard of people doing the latter. On the former, and I don't know what the state of the LabVIEW compiler is, but it wasn't designed to be a multi-threaded thing when it was built. And so it would be complex to rebuild the LabVIEW compiler to take advantage of threads.
I'm not aware of any work being done on that.
Okay.
Jakob has something to say?
I'm on some parts of the compiler is multi-threaded because we switched over some years ago to use an LLVM backend, and for that we actually have started to parallel compilers on that. So pieces of it definitely is parallel, runs in parallel, but otherwise I see as Brian said.
And I think the build process in particular, I don't know exactly how LabVIEW does it, but it's kind of a process of kind of loading a thing in memory and then trying to kind of save things over here. And that process is kind of naturally has to kind of happen one by one, where it's moving, the links are all changing, and parts of it can be parallel, but the majority of it is very kind of serialized. Stack them all up in a file, one after another. Yeah.
Comment on build time. So we have actually talked with 2020 about improving the build time of PPL specifically. And I think that I've heard the number of 30%, but I'm talking on because it also depends on what you're building exactly. But we've actually spent some thinking about one PPL specifically.
Could you build a full roof and parallelize it for
Along the question of PPL, so Jim mentioned that for complex projects, a lot of times we'll build it up in terms of PPL.
I didn't say I would. Oh, I said you could.
Stand back. So when I know that my impression is that there are people out there who do that process, and my question is that a purely build type of process, or is that something that people are doing in development, they're putting all their dependencies in PPLs and developing on top of those PPLs, or is it purely a build type process, where you build the lowest level class and then inject that and go up just straight to build class?
I think you develop on top of your PPLs. At GDevCon 1, there was a presentation given by Matthias Godot, where he basically talked about how he does all this and all the benefits he has on on the, his resulting development experience and build kind of stuff, I suggest watching that video.
And the editor improves, right? Because it's loading into the PPL.
There were a lot of great presentations at GDECCON 1, and that one was probably my favorite, just in terms of, wow, this can really change a lot of our experience.
So along those lines though, like some of those dependencies tend to be things that end up stored, would typically be stored in like VI lib and are exposed on pallets and then mix them. And at one point in time, I tried to do that type of thing and the experience was not complete.
Yeah.
Is there like a best practices around that type of thing?
So Matthias talked about this in his presentation as well, and what he actually does is he takes his VI lib dependencies and he'll build them into a PPL, and he'll link to that from his code. And that results in, it's like if his app has like 30 PPLs, like if you did it the normal way, every one of those would get copies of the VI lib file when you did the build.
Yeah.
But all of those link to the dependencies that he's built into this like lowest level, he didn't call it this, but effectively VI lib PPL. And
Does that replace the functionality, like the APIs of pallets though?
Your question was how do you get them in pallets?
That's part of it.
If you're using PPL for a project, how do you get them in pallets?
Because I mean, if you haven't loaded a project, you could of course go through and manually do it, but that, right, you engage the factor.
If you use Quick Drop, you don't need to worry because they're in your project.
But like both instances show up then, and you have to figure out which one is in the PPL or which one is in the
Quick Drop shows you the namespace name.
So you will have to select.
So yeah.
Sometimes those get very long, and it's like, sure, the PPL extension is way back here off screen.
Yep.
Just type in PP space PPL.
Yeah.
And that'll have it there.
Well, you have to type it, it'll be libp, but yeah.
Okay.
In LabVIEW 2020, it shows you where it is in the project's help, so.
Oh, yeah.
Does VFDM support putting PPL items into pallets?
I think so.
I think pallets for PPL is one of the most painful things that you have to do. I mean, you have to manually create them. You can't use synchronized directory or anything like that. You manually create them, put them in the library, build it with the library, and then go and create the pallet files that pull in from what you built in the PPL. So it's not a great process.
Using PPL really has required a lot of tooling that people have developed.
Yeah, we basically wrote our own linker.
You wrote a good
Linker. That when you make a change, it'll go through and see what PPLs have to be rebuilt in what order. It sucks.
Do you have that available on that's And then people also too for switching in a project that uses PPLs. I think just recently was it in 2019.
They replace
the project actually allows you to replace a PPL with the library that was used to build a PPL, so that you can do some sort of stuff.
Although, with respect to this, we are thinking of, but we haven't done the final approval on putting the code on API into LabVIEW proper. So that allows you to build the PPL, basically, audio build processes.
That in one of the marketing slides, I think might be so it might be official.
Although Jakob and I are on the same team, not the R&D, so he's my boss actually. That's why he uses Python.
So I think we're technically at the end of our session. I thank you to the expert panel, and I hope that's a good discussion today.